As we begin our lesson for today, I have a question for you. What is your MVP? Now notice I didn't say who. I asked you, what is your MVP? This month we have been talking about principles, ideals, that if you are clear about them, you will experience real success in your life. In this series, we've been talking about the secret of success. We've been redefining what success looks like. Each week, we've been rethinking the very name of success. Now, we all know how the world defines success, at least we think we do. So today, we're going to examine how the Bible, in fact, this month, examine how the Bible defines success. And this has been challenging each and every week as we rethink some of these lessons. Today, our focus is on the MVP. Now, if you are in the business community, you know that these ideas have been percolating around for a while. You probably recognize them, but I have a hunch that they don't always get translated down to your personal life. So again, what is your MVP? Now, when I shared this title with those in the church office this week, their mind immediately went to sports. And I think that is common. But when we are talking about MVP, it is about something completely different. MVP actually stands for mission, vision, and plan. If you are clear on your mission, if you understand your purpose, why you exist, and if you have a vision of how it's going to live out, and if you have concrete goals and objectives in your life, and you develop a plan to fulfill that vision, you will find you will accomplish more in life. You'll have more joy and satisfaction. And because we're talking about biblical concepts of success, hopefully at the end of our life we will hear these words, "Well done, good and faithful servant." A clear purpose for why we do these things, I think, might be illustrated by the fact of this story. Robert Bryce in the New York Times Magazine talked about eye black. You've seen this as you watch sports, what that black goop that gets under people's eyes. This is what he wrote when he did some investigating on it. Autumn is prime time for the use of eye black in sports. Baseball players in daytime playoff games and football players put dark stuff under their eyes, supposedly to reduce glare bouncing off their cheeks. One popular smear, called No Glare, contains crushed charcoal, paraffin, beeswax, and petroleum. Does it do anything? Dr. Oliver Shine, an ophthalmologist at Johns Hopkins School of Medicine, says probably not. Even so, it is a tradition. The Pro Football Hall of Fame has a picture of Andy Farkas, who played for the Redskins back in 1942, wearing eye black. Bobby Valentine, who was a manager for the Texas Rangers, would wear eye black in the dugout. And Boog Powell, who was a Baltimore Orioles star, wore eye black for 17 seasons in the major leagues. "I don't remember it ever doing any good," he says, "but you looked cool." Okay, there is a sense of purpose. And then there is mission, the M of MVP. Now, this is very different than missions, which we talked about last week. The mission we are talking about is why. Why does our organization exist? What is our purpose? Our mission, again, is no secret. And so I would like you to take out your bulletin. In fact, our mission statement has been located here for a couple years now. It's right on the front. It's on the side here. So I would like you to take out your bulletin and let's read this together. Sharing Christ through faith and action. When our church met to decide our mission statement, we had a long discussion on our core values. Now, we've been walking through these value statements throughout this month. Now, our discussion wasn't a debate. It was simply a mere acknowledgement of who we are as the people of God in a place that we are calling the Gearing United Methodist Church. And so we came up with what you see here on the back of the bulletin: spiritual growth and vitality, Christian fellowship, a sense of belonging, Christian education, mission and outreach, multi-generation. Once we put these words up on the board, we kind of stepped back and we asked, okay, why? Why do we exist? What is our motivation? And as we learned last week, our ambition is to be godly, honorable, and good. And out of this came sharing Christ through faith and action. This defines everything we do. It is our purpose as a church. It is a mission of who and what we are. Now, if you were to approach any corporation and go to their website or look through their documents, you would find a clear sense of purpose, of what their mission statement is. For example, the mission statement of Coca-Cola is to refresh the world in mind, body, and spirit, to inspire moments of optimism and happiness through our brands and actions. The mission statement of Microsoft is to enable people and businesses throughout the world to realize their full potential. We consider our mission statement a commitment to our customers. And the mission statement where my daughter works, Dairy Queen, states, to create positive memories for all who touch DQ. These are clear statements, and in each you can see how these corporations live these out. Are you clear on your mission statement? If I sat down with you and asked, what is your mission in life? Could you tell me? Do you know what your purpose is? Last week, our confirmation class went on our first field trip. We went to St. Francis Episcopal Church. Father Mark Selby is a good friend of mine, and more importantly, he makes me laugh. Very funny guy. As we were visiting, Father Selby asked our 8th graders, why do you go to church? What is the motivation, the purpose to go to church and to do confirmation? And of course, our confirmand said, our parents make us go. Being honest. Okay. I think as a church, that is a valid question. The church, the meaning of the church, is very different than it was when my grandfather was a pastor back in the 40s and 50s and 60s. And I think it's very different than when my dad was a pastor in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. So today, what is the purpose of the church? I want you, for the next few minutes, to turn to the person next to you and answer this question. What is the purpose of the church? Okay? So turn to the person next to you and answer this question. What is the purpose of the church? Now, I only gave you a minute. And I realize this discussion could go on for a very long time. And I admit that that's not very fair. But maybe we can give us, the church, some direction by answering this question. And I'm going to start with this one question. What is God's purpose? Why did God create us? Because I believe that when we can answer that question, I think we will find our driving purpose. I'm going to propose that the first purpose of God, as we talked about with the kids, is love. And Jerry Lane's going to read a passage, as we talked about before we walked in, is just dripping full of love.
Today's reading is from 1 John chapter 4, 7 through 17. Dear friends, let us love one another because love comes from God. Whoever loves is a child of God and knows God. Whoever does not love does not know God, for God is love. And God showered his love for us by sending his only Son into the world, so that we might have life through him. This is what love is. It is not what we have loved God, but that he loved us and sent his Son to be the means by which our sins are forgiven. Dear friends, if this is how God loved us, then we should love one another. No one has ever seen God, but if we love one another, God lives within union in us, and his love is made perfect in us. We are sure that we lived in union with God, and that he lives in union with us, because he has given us his Spirit. And we have seen and tell stories that the Father sent his Son to be with the Savior of the world. If we declare that Jesus is the Son of God, we live in union with God, and God lives in union with us. And we ourselves know and believe the love which God has for us. God is love, and those who live in love live in union with God, and God lives in union with them. Love is made perfect in us in order that we may have courage on the judgment day, and we will have it because our life in this world is the same as God, in this is Christ.
Our first purpose, I'm going to propose, is to be recipients of God's love. And because we are recipients of this love, we must do something about it. When we receive grace, which is simply a love note from God, we must respond. And that response is vitally important. The concept is not hard to understand. When your parents decided to have you, it was not because they needed someone to do their chores. Well, maybe Ted, but but you, not to do your chores. When your parents decided to have you, it was not because they needed a tax write-off. There was something inside of them to create, a yearning to love, to give love to you. Whether you were planned or not, you were birthed in love. When Sarah and I were first talking about starting a family, I was in seminary. And I admit I was not on the same page with my wife. She was ready, but my mind went to the fact that I was driving 6 hours back and forth between the church I was serving and the school that I was attending. And then I also thought about the 2 churches that I was serving. And I was thought about how am I going to get all the work done on my graduate degree. But we finally made the decision together, and I'll admit that in those 9 months, I went from worry to delight and excitement. Now, I loved Sarah, but when I held Emma for the first time, I loved her more than my wife. Now, I love them both, but my love between my spouse and my daughters is very different. In that moment when I held Emma, I could not realize that someone could love somebody like I loved this one child. It allowed me to understand how God could love us, how God could invest in us, how God could have this deep, abounding love for me, a child of God. Now, as my children grew, it was enjoyable to watch how they would reciprocate their love back to me. They would hold my hand when I would take them to school. They would give me hugs. They would laugh at my jokes. But that's not why we have kids. We don't expect reciprocation. I'll admit I won't turn it down, and it does feel good. But as my daughters reach their teen years, I miss that reciprocation. Something just happens in those years, and I call it the eye-rolling years, or the please do not acknowledge me in public years. I wonder if this is how God feels. You know, when we have that healthy relationship with someone, we love them and they reciprocate us that love back to us. But we don't love them because we expect to be loved back. I believe that God has that same relationship with us. Those teenage years that we have seen from either kids or from our nieces and nephews, maybe that's what God experiences in those college years, our college years. You know, we go away to school and no parent is forcing us to attend worship, and we begin to question the very meaning of the church, of spirituality, of our relationship with our Creator. And church just isn't a priority anymore. And getting up early for Sunday school on a weekend, it just ain't going to happen. And when you go to church, it's kind of embarrassing because you're learning and questioning everything. And then we have that one day. It's like maybe a crisis moment in our life, at work, in our family. Maybe we're thinking about starting a family. And we realize I can run back to the God who has always loved me, who I haven't always been faithful with, but God has always been faithful to me. Having 3 daughters who are now teenagers right now, I am so thankful that my parents welcomed me back after I was done with my teenage years. Listen, our first purpose in life is to let God love you. Our response to that is to love God with all of our soul, all of our strength, all of our heart, all of our mind. Jesus says this is the first commandment. This is what we were made for. The Bible says you were created for this. The idea of love is central to the very teaching of John Wesley. He called it grace, and he said that it requires a response. Love and take care of one another. Love and take care of the world. You were created to do acts of justice and kindness. This is scriptural. Now, the book of James says that we're supposed to take care of the widows and the orphans. And in a society that had no social welfare net, Someone had to take care of those who were most vulnerable in society. So who do we have today that are most vulnerable? Well, I would say it's the elderly, who are so often at the bay of financial scams. I would say it's children and youth. And I'm going to be very clear on this. I don't care how mature someone looks or how mature someone appears. In working with this population, if there is a power imbalance from anyone who's above 18 to anyone that's below 18. Period. In fact, that's why our denomination has a program to teach and that we have to be trained in called Safe Gatherings to work with this vulnerable population. And Jesus also adds to the list of those who were vulnerable. The stranger, those who were hungry, those who are on the margins of society. We were created to take care of those who were created by God. Paul even writes this in one of his letters. For we are God's handiwork, created in Christ Jesus to do good works which God prepared in advance for us to do. The word translated handiwork here is poeme. As you might imagine, the word poem comes from it. So we are God's poetry, God's works of art. God created us to do good works every day. It is part of the rhythm of life. It's our end. It's our mission. It's our purpose. So the purpose to be loved by God and to love others is found within these 6 jars. We have here spiritual growth and vitality. It is a recognition that our life, the essence of life, is to grow closer with Jesus. We have mission and outreach. If you remember last week, we are to serve. We are to do good. We are to be the very hands of God for people around the world. We have Christian education. There's a thirst to love, a love to learn about the Bible, the works of John Wesley, and more importantly, an obligation to teach. We have a jar for multi-generational. As I talked about, the church is very different than it was when my grandpa was a pastor, than it was when my dad was a pastor, and the church is very different than it is for my children. We also have a way of looking at multi-generational. What we do things like we have the Confirmation Mentor Program. We do this by being a leader for Children's Church and Vacation Bible School. The Christmas Cantata has participants of all ages and generations. This is all done so that we can learn from each other. We also have a jar for Christian fellowship. We were created to be loved by God and to love one another. This is why our coffee ministry is important. It's not just a justice issue. It's to say to someone, how are you? Is there anything I can do for you? And we also have a jar called a sense of belonging. We're putting together a group called the Welcome Team. We do this as an acknowledgement that the church is a very different place today. We can't just put up the cross and flame and expect people to come in and join us. People are looking for a sense that they belong, that they matter. Now, these secrets of success are no secret. For this church, it's not a secret either. This is our purpose. Now, for you, your jars might be labeled a little bit differently. Maybe you've got one for labeled finances, or maybe you have one for hobbies. Maybe you have one for work. Maybe you have one for spiritual sense. If you are clear on your purpose, these jars are going to lead you to where you need to go. But if you don't have a clear purpose, it's going to be, as one of my colleagues says, you're going to aim at nothing, you're going to hit it every time. I'm going to suggest to you that the great purpose of your life is to love God, to be loved by God, and because of that we are to love all of God's creation. George Bernard Shaw once wrote, "This is the true joy of life, the being used up for a purpose recognized by yourself as a mighty one, being a force of nature instead of a feverish, selfish little cloth of ailments and grievances, complaining that the world will not devote itself to making you happy." There is a fulfillment to living into a purpose greater than oneself. By doing this, you find true joy in life. So if this is our purpose, our mission, then what is our vision? If our mission is why we exist, to share Christ through faith and action, then the vision is how do we get there. At the same retreat where we came up with our core values in our mission statement, we did some dreaming. We talked about, okay, where do you think the church is going to be 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years out the road? And the list actually contained a lot of stuff about this building. Are you surprised that we've been talking about this building remodel for a long time? But we also focused on some other things. We talked about our children and youth ministry. We talked about the music ministry a lot. Now, the building remodel, what we did is what we call a BAG, a big, audacious goal. We believe it is preparing this church a tool for ministry for the future. And it's acknowledgement that we cannot do everything on our own. Now, when I think of BAG, B-A-G, I think of John Kennedy's speech to get a man to the moon. That did not mean that John Kennedy was going to do it all by himself. It meant that the whole nation needed to be behind him to reach that goal. Maybe a bigger audacious goal, I think of Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech. But as we have seen this year, that goal of racial harmony, as big and audacious as it was, is still far from fruition. And each one of us still has a part to play in fulfilling that dream. Now, the biblical concept here is chazon. It is the power of the vision. It is God-inspired. In fact, Proverbs 29:18 says, where there is no vision, the people perish. Last week we talked about the sense of BAG, B-A-G, with our missions. Our purpose has always been to love God and to love neighbor, and our mission emphasis lived out this purpose. But as you know, we were kind of all over the map when it came to missions. We'd have a mission project here, and we'd have a mission project there, and we would display it over here, and we'd display it over there, and we were just kind of taking that shotgun approach. It's like, okay, we can hope we hit something. But then we had a vision. What if we took all of these mission projects and organized them into a plan that spans 12 months, each month where we focus on just one mission project? This was our BAG, big audacious goal, and all we need to do was just examine the MVP to make it happen. You know, this aiming at nothing and doing everything kind of happens in our personal life. I have been working with Dave Ramsey's Financial Peace University ministry for 13 years now. And in the area of personal finance, we know we should not spend more than we make. We know that we should be saving for retirement. We know that we should be saving things for like Christmas and vacation. We know this, but as Dave Ramsey says, if we don't have a vision of how to get there, if we don't have a name for every dollar that we make, we get to the end of the money instead of the end of the month. Now you might say, well, this is just life. You know, when we got married, we had these dreams. We're going to go do this and that. We're going to live over here. We're going to have 2.5 kids, and then life happens. And we get busy raising those kids. We get busy climbing the ladder of success at work. We get busy with just life, and we forgot about those dreams, and our vision perished. This is why we need a plan. Maybe you're thinking about some financial help. Well, we will be offering a Dave Ramsey course in January. Maybe you're looking for a way to grow with Christ. You know, we're looking at starting a disciple Bible study plan or program with Central Alabanza, maybe even a purpose-driven life course with Rick Warren. Maybe you need a plan, you're looking for a plan for Christian fellowship. Once the basement is done, we're planning on doing a Wednesday night program that we're calling Family Night. Maybe you're looking for a sense of belonging. Our welcome team will make sure that we go out of the way to greet all of our guests. Christian education, we need you to ensure that a new generation is raised up to learn about Jesus. And multi-generational, join the cantata. Mission and outreach, your dollars, your hands, your donations is part of our plan each month next year. Now for this church, each jar represents a plan. In your own personal life, in your own jars, what do you need to do to reach your own goal? Maybe for your family, maybe it's to sit down for one meal with the whole family. And I'm not talking about Thanksgiving, that doesn't count. Maybe it's at work. Maybe you need to read a book or take a class at WNCC. Maybe it's a way to kind of get ahead a little bit. Maybe it's in the area of hobbies, or maybe it's an exercise. You know, I don't have to tell you that this week begins the holidays. What would happen if we started the exercise program now? What happens if we started that food program, you know, that diet now that kind of bled into the holidays? What is your MVP? What is our mission, our vision, our plan to make success, which in turn gives us joy and fulfillment? What will make that possible? I want to conclude this morning with a story about Ruben Gonzalez. Ruben, since the third grade, wanted to be an Olympic athlete. It was his goal. He loved to watch the Olympics. It was what he wanted to do, and he was going to do it until he succeeded. But it was not until he was in college and he saw Scott Hamilton compete in the 1984 Sarajevo Games that he actually made the decision to train for the Olympics. Ruben said to himself, if that little guy can do it, I can do it too. I'm going to be in the next Olympics. It's a done deal. I have just to find a sport. I just have to find a sport. So after doing a little research on Olympic sports, Ruben decided he was going to pick a sport that built on his strengths. Now, he knew he was a good athlete, but not a great athlete. His strength was perseverance. He never quit anything. And he figured it had to be a sport that was so tough and that had so many broken bones that there would be a lot of quitters. He would just kind of rise to the top through attrition. And he finally settled on the luge. I don't know if you can see that in that picture there. So what he did is he wrote Sports Illustrated. He asked, where do you go to learn about the luge? And so they wrote back Lake Placid, New York. This is where they had the Olympics in 1936, 1980. That's where the track is. So he called up Lake Placid. He says, I'm an athlete in Houston. I want to learn how to luge. So can I be in the Olympics in 4 years? Will you help me? And the guy on the phone asked, how old are you? And Ruben said, I'm 21. And the guy says, you're too old. You're 10 years too late. We only start with 10-year-olds. Forget it. Ruben couldn't forget it. And so he started telling the man his life story and hoping to kind of buy some time until he thought of something else. But along the way, he said he was born in Argentina. And with that, the guy said, Argentina? Why didn't you say so? If you go for Argentina, we'll help you. It turns out that the sport of luge was going to be dropped by the Olympics because there weren't enough countries doing luge competitively. And so the guy said, if you'll go for Argentina and somehow we can get you into the top 50 ranked lugers in the world in 4 years, which is what you'll need to make it an Olympics, it will add one more country to the sport of luge, and that would make it a stronger sport. If you make it, you'd actually be helping out the U.S. team. So then he added, but if you come all the way to Lake Placid, you have to know two things. Number one, if you want to do it at your age and you want to do it in only 4 years, it'll be brutal. 9 out of 10 guys quit. Number two, expect to break a bunch of bones. And Ruben thought, great, this works right under my plan. I'm not a quitter. The harder it is, the easier it is for me. And so a few days later, he was walking along Main Street in Lake Placid looking for the U.S. Olympic Center. And a day later, he was in a beginner's class of 15 aspiring Olympians. But after the first day, he thought about quitting. But then a friend reminded him why he was doing this and why to continue on. At the end of the semester, at the end of the class, the 14 other people quit. He was the only one to make it through the whole training event. 4 grueling years later, Ruben Gonzalez realized his dream when he walked into the opening ceremonies of the 1988 Calgary Winter Olympics. He went to Albertville in 92, Salt Lake City in 2000. Because he took immediate and persistent action on his dream, he will always be known as a 3-time Olympian. What is your MVP? Your mission, your vision, your plan for the church, for you. Now, I'm not naive. I know that some of our plans will never succeed. I one time said to a parishioner of mine who worked for the USDA research station, my frustration with some of my ministry ideas that were spectacular failures. And he gave me some great advice. He said, at our facility, 90% of what we work on never materializes. Good advice. It's not the plan, but the purpose. Just remember, we were created to be loved by God, to love God, and the response is to love another by sharing Christ through faith and action. Amen. I've been told that we have a treat for our offering here this